Hello. Hello. What's up, guys? What is up? So, give me 1 second. Mm-mm-mm-mm. I'm also trying to go live on, Instagram. Right. All right. Give me 1 second. All right. I think I'm live. Do, 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 do. Why is my phone not working? Hey, Michaela, can you hear me on Instagram? Yes, no, maybe so. Perfect. Okay. Apparently, so many questions. Hi. Okay. So, what I am doing today is very, very random, especially on Instagram. I am talking about news, what's going on in the world, and in America, and all that fun jazz. Anyways, hi. Okay. So basically, what I'm here to talk about, oh, yes, and this is very ghetto because the microphone won't connect to my laptop, but only a desktop. So I get this mic for YouTube. Today, basically, what we're going to talk about, it was kind of a trial and error with this, and I'm going to see if more people want to do more live updates about news. It also might be easier for me because then I won't have to edit things and take twice as long. So I might be doing that instead. So a lot has happened, especially over in China, that most people don't realize what is happening. Basically, I have two notebooks here because of so much news that has taken place. But basically, China's defense military and ministry has announced how they are working closely with Pakistan to become more of an alliance and allies within war times. And essentially, since America has pulled out of Afghanistan, Pakistan has leaned more closely towards Pakistan and vice versa, which means they're becoming more allies in their thought process, their religious, their political, and everything of that matter, which can be kind of concerning in the long run. But at this point, it's up in the air, and most people don't realize the 50-50 chance of it being contained and stable or becoming something aggressive. So what also had happened as well is back on March 18th of 2021, so literally about a year ago, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken visited China to talk to Chinese diplomat. And then Blinken went on to say, quote, "Our administration is committed to leading with diplomacy to advance the interests of the United States and to strengthen the rules based on international order. That system is not an abstraction. It helps countries resolve differences peacefully, coordinate effectively, and participate in global commerce with the assurance that everyone is following the same rules. Today, we'll have an opportunity to address key priorities, both domestic and global, so that China can better understand our administration's intentions and approach. We'll also discuss our deep concerns with actions by China, including Hong Kong, Taiwan, cyber attacks on the United States, economic coercion toward our allies. Each of these actions threaten the rule-based order that maintains stability. That's not only why they're internal matters and why we feel our obligations to raise these issues here today. So then China then responds, quote, "China is firmly opposed to U.S. interference in Chinese international affairs. We have expressed our opposition to such interference, and we will take firm actions in response. Our human rights, we hope the United States will do better on human rights. China has made steady progress in human rights, and the fact is that there are many problems within the United States regarding human rights, which is admitted by the US self as well. The United States has also said that countries can't rely on force in today's world to resolve the challenges we face, and its failure to use various means to topple the so-called authoritarian states. And the challenges facing the United States and human rights are deep-seated. They did not just emerge over the past 4 years, such as BLM. It did not come up only recently. So we do hope that our two countries is important that we merge our respective affairs well instead of deflecting the blame on somebody else in the world," unquote. So the problem is that the US has been trying to get into affairs of China for over a year, especially with Taiwan. This has been happening a lot longer, just like with Russia and Ukraine. They had been at each other since 2014, but obviously Western media didn't want to report on it because there were other things that were going on, especially with the elections and then Trump and then what was going on in Israel and Pakistan between them bombing each other and whatnot. And so it just became a whole issue. I personally think it was more so on the back burner because they didn't want to show that the US and China and Russia had very strong words to say to each other that were not pleasant by any means. So after the video was captured by CNN at that time with Blinken and China back in March of last year. But it wasn't the full version. So Blinken told the reporters to leave the room after just 4 minutes. And this is true. CNN has reported on it and said, yes, that is true. We were told to leave the room after 4 minutes. This is where China responded with, quote, "Why are you so afraid of the media being here?" unquote. Then China allowed the reporters to stay. Blinken did this because he did not want them to see the true, difficult questions they were going to ask. This conflict with the US and China, specific area like Taiwan, has been an issue for well over a year. We are not sure if we're not sure how long this issue with Taiwan and China has been a big conflict, especially with the US, because over here and in Europe, they don't specify, they don't report on it. China also censors their media, so you can only get so much. So it's such an issue to get actual accurate things reported on. So this could have been an issue well over a decade, maybe more, but we just don't know. So the problem is too with Chinese relations with the US is because on April 8th of 2022, Nancy Pelosi planned and announced that she would be visiting Taiwan. This announcement got China's attention. China was not shy about announcing their outrage. They went on their public television, national television in China, and local news stations did report on it, and it did broadcast around the world. This was not obviously something that was quiet at all by any means. And so Pelosi aborted her travel plan, and in her place, about 6 U.S. congressmen from the military, intelligence, foreign affairs, justice, and finance committees went over in her place. So then analysis said that the Chinese mainland with the Taiwan card and about more military sales to the island by hyping, quote, mainland threats, unquote. The Chinese Foreign Ministry strongly opposed the visit, that China firmly opposed officials exchanging between the US and Taiwan in any form, and US congressmen should abide by the one China principle pursued by the US government. So this came before, obviously, Pakistan became more buddy-buddy with China. And I think China and Pakistan became more buddy-buddy because of what happened in the U.S. trying to get involved with what is going on. But besides the whole Chinese problem that we're having over there, a lot of Western media does not want to report on it, and they won't report on it, and that's becoming a huge issue because tensions over there are starting to escalate to the point of India even is on the brink of teetering between being on NATO's side and Western side or going towards China's side. Now, the problem with India, especially right now, is Russia, which is super weird. Russia has been giving them military aid to stop China from trying to invade into India on their border. So since things are getting very complicated over in Russia and they're using a lot of their military supplies for the Ukraine crisis, India is weighing their options, which is hard for them because they've been an ally of the West for a long time. But now that things are rising with China and they need help backing them, the problem is do they still rely on Russia for those military aid, or do they go straight to the US and NATO and ask for military aid to keep China at bay? So they're in a very, very hot spot, and they keep teetering between the two, and that's why they, in every UN and NATO meeting and conference, they always stay neutral within their voting ability because they just aren't sure where this is going to go. If they should even keep, NATO as an ally, or if they should go with Russia because they're going to give them more aid and this and that and blah, blah, blah. So that's the real issue. And a lot of people don't know also about what's going on in India and that affair. And so we need to make sure that we stay on top of that, because if Russia continues to essentially be an ally by aiding India, that could put tensions between Russia and China, which will also not be good in the long run. But if China and Russia have this secret agreement of not technically tiptoeing on each other's shoes, they might be secret allies. We know that China is already sending aid regardless of what NATO has threatened to put sanctions on them. So China is already sending aid in money, economic, what's the word? They're already giving aid on the field with medical, and they've talked about and announced kind of that they might send military aid to Russia. And so if that's the fact, then obviously we're going to sanction them, which means the US is not going to have food at all, because a lot of our portion of food does come from China and Ukraine and Russia, and that's why we're running out of wheat products and pasta and rices from Ukraine and Russia, because they are one of the biggest distributors to the world. So that's the issue that we're having. And then China also supplies a lot of canned food and a lot of other staples that we are not seeing on the shelves right now. So that is the issue. Let's go on to, so on April 5th, 2022, the Biden administration approved its second arms sale to Taiwan authorities in 2 months, an estimated 95 million package, including equipment and services. April 9th, U.S. Senator Josh Hawley introduced the Taiwan Weapons Exports Act, which would speed up the delivery of critical weapons to Taiwan, U.S. media reported. So this could also be a major issue, since that was not too long ago. And that's another reason why China is also strengthening their allies wherever they can at this point, because NATO is basically threatening Russia and China at this point by not backing down, which, my personal opinion, don't poke the bear, don't poke the dragon. And that's what the eagle keeps doing. And the eagle thinks that it has bigger cojones than the two combined, which, I'm an American, I live here, but that's not true. Those two nations alone could literally walk over the US twice over if they wanted to. So what Biden is doing right now is atrocious. I understand wanting to give aid to a lot of countries, especially now when tensions are rising and war is prevalent, but the priorities of this is very scattered. I don't know how to explain it. So I don't even know. There's just so much that has happened that it's wild, that independent journalists are finding some statements to be true about Nazis in Ukraine that are using the military aid that the US and NATO is sending. So it's wild. I don't know if I'll be able to report on all this because it's quite a lot, but we're going to try to get to it. All right, here we go. So Clayton Morris on YouTube, channel Redacted. I'll be putting a link in my YouTube after this with everything, all the information I got will be on my YouTube. So if you want to check out all that and do your own research, I will let you guys know. On the YouTube channel Redacted, had award-winning journalist Eva Bartlett on the show on May 1st, 2022. Eva talks about her experience, journalism, and encounters with those in Ukraine. Her research tells a different side of what Western media is showing the rest of the world. So when I looked into her, she is a legit journalist, a legit independent journalist who has reported since mid 2000s. She was over in Iraq and such to report on the Afghan war, Iraq, and the terrorism and this and that. So Clayton, the host, goes on to say, quote, "You've been writing about showing Ukrainians that welcome Russian presence once they arrive. Can you explain the side of the story to our audience?" Sorry, I write my notes because it's so much easier than trying to read, Eva goes on to say, quote, basically, if you're a Ukrainian citizen and you don't agree with the government, you can be imprisoned. You can be assassinated. You can be tortured if you're a journalist, particularly. And there are a long list of journalists that have been imprisoned and tortured and assassinated by the Ukrainian Secret Service or intelligence service or whatever by the Nazis themselves. So if you are somebody who is critical of what the Zelensky government is doing and you speak out about it, then you risk being killed. So there's that aspect of living, under that rule all the time, that the terror of thinking any moment you could be killed by the government, by Nazis. But there's also a great deal of corruption, and every country has corruption. But the Russian forces, contrary to how the West media is portraying them, when they came, they were delivering humanitarian aid. If there's destruction, they're helping to rehabilitate the area. So what I saw, for example, here at the end of March, I think we went to an area that had been liberated by DPR and Russian forces a couple weeks prior in Volnovka. There was a lot of destruction, but Russians were handing out the humanitarian aid, and slowly but surely life was returning to that of the area. When Western media reported on that, when Western media reported on that, the report on the destruction of the hospitals there, they didn't report that the Ukrainian forces had occupied the hospital and had militarized it and mined the intensive care until unit before leaving. So there's a whole lot of context that's missing, that people wouldn't understand why normal citizens would welcome Russian forces. They welcome them because it's the start to return to peace and stability. By the way, it's the same way with Syria. Western media wasn't reporting on what they dubbed rebels, which were actually Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups. And they weren't reporting on areas of Eastern Ghouta or Eastern Ilopa that were occupied by these forces, that the people there were, again, same thing. It's the same scenario. They were starved, they were tortured, they were imprisoned, they were executed, and these terrorists that the Western media was whitewashing and lauding as violent rebels, and it's the same scenario now in Ukraine. So, oh man, when I deep dive into doing news, journalism, politics, I've always known that it was corrupt, always, and I never knew. And I've always known that the United States was never a perfect country, ever. No country is perfect, and we know this, and we should acknowledge it, obviously. But I'm not surprised at what they have hidden. I'm just surprised a lot of countries think America is so great when we're not. And we try to liberate all these countries, yet we're not. We are killing people, we are starving people, we are torturing individuals. And there have been multiple journalists, even here, when the whole Hunter Biden laptop thing came out. It was such a scandal. It couldn't be a fathom of, and it was such a hot thing to report on because it was true. And right away, the media here in America was saying it was Russian propaganda, that it was trying to get Biden out of office and not get a Democrat, blah, 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 and get Trump reelected. Now, right away, personally, I knew that that was true. Why? Because I had already been doing my research on it, and it was there and gone in a blink of an eye. Literally overnight, someone had reported on it. The laptop, the repair from the shop where the laptop was ditched by Hunter Biden, he repaired it. He saw the information. He gave it to the U.S. government, and then he gave it to Trump's lawyer because he knew that the government was going to do absolutely nothing with it, which is true. They didn't, but Trump's lawyer did. But the people who were reporting on it, the independent journalists, a lot of them got blacked out from social media, from speaking about it. Like literally overnight, all their social medias got blacked out. They were blocked. They couldn't use the internet. They couldn't do anything to report on it. And then that same day that they got blacked out, all the media was raging that it was Russian propaganda, and it was a mess. So even though journalists, reporters, news stations, even in other countries are reporting on such things, the U.S. does it here. They always have. Back in the 70s, I forgot, I believe it was Nixon. There was Congress, and Nixon, I believe, went on to basically censor the media. Before that happened in the 70s, the media was 100% truthful, and they told you how it was, and they told you if there was political obscurity or what countries were doing to other people. It was horrendous. But ever since about, I want to say, the mid 70s, I can't remember the actual name of what happened to it. The U.S. has censored everything that they had put on television, that they allowed journalists and reporters to actually report on. So it's frustrating, especially for someone like me who I want the truth, I seek the truth, and it's not just for my knowledge, it's because I want to allow you guys, because I know a lot of you have kids and families, and you got to support them, and you got to feed them, and you got to go to work, so you don't have the time to sit and research and do all these things like I do. And I feel like it's my duty and my job and responsibility, since I am currently not working of any sorts. I feel like this is something that I need to allow to give to you guys in general, because all this takes many, many hours and even sometimes days to dig and find the actual facts of what's going on. And this is basically what I want to give to you and my gift to you, because it's very difficult. People don't realize how difficult and how time consuming to do all this research is, because you have to sift through Western media, Chinese media, Russian media, Ukraine media, the UK media. So a lot of it is digging through legit sources that are not funded by private industries that lean one way or another. It's hard to find reporters that are unbiased, and it's hard to find news stations that are unbiased. So yeah, sorry about that rant. I had to let that out because it really is frustrating. I never got into politics until a couple of years ago, but still, like, it's so frustrating to not be able to make the proper judgment of what needs to, be done. Like, to use your freaking brain. Like, come on. I wish I could cuss right now. The F word is my favorite word, but I can't because YouTube. Hi, YouTube. But yeah, anyways, just give me 1 second, guys. Give me 1 second. How's everyone? How's everyone? How are you guys? How is everyone? We chill? We Gucci? All right, here we go. Anyways, going back to Clayton Morris with Redacted, he went on to ask her, or make a statement, I should say, after Eva made her comment and research. So Clayton, quote, "Well, if you dig into the United States Department website and you look at known human rights abusers, terrorist organizations, the SBU, which is Security Service of Ukraine, is listed by the U.S. State Department on their website. Known war crimes, making people disappear. I mean, it's listed right on the U.S. Department website. They will disappear individuals. They will be held against their will." And one of those reporters was obviously Gonzalo Lira. He is a Chile Ukrainian citizen, and he's been there for many, many years. So when Lira was in Ukraine, he currently is a blogger and an independent journalist. But when he lived in Ukraine, he was brought into custody by the SBU at the beginning of April. He was held for about 2 weeks before he was forced to sign a confidential document stating he would not talk about what happened in those 2 weeks. So within 2 weeks of being held captive against his will, he was let go. He's been on many, many, many independent journalist stations, big news stations that have reported on this. And he still continues to say, I cannot talk about what happened within those 2 weeks because I have signed a document stating I cannot. So what happened to Lira is he did elaborate what happened on the day that he was arrested or basically taken against his will. What had happened is he went to the door one day because there was a knock on the door and there were 8 individuals dressed with Ukrainian military gear and told him he had to come or forcefully be removed from his house. So he was given the option, and knowing his option and what had been going on in Ukraine, obviously, with the Nazi regime, he went peacefully. Now, a lot of people are going to disagree because Western media has said that there is no Nazi regime, obviously, in Ukraine. But you can't take one side's truth over the other. You can't. Because if you did that, you would just be listening to a tyrant in general. It doesn't matter. So, sorry, my train of thought kind of went, ooh. But that's the thing is like when Russia announced that there was a Nazi regime in Ukraine, I didn't fully believe it, but I didn't fully think it was true. So you got to take everything with a grain of salt. Like I've always known that America was not always telling us the truth, that they were corrupt. Look at what they've done. Years ago, they put Ukraine on their secret service on a Nazi terrorist group list for the United States. And years later, we send them aid, and the Nazi regime is still using it, and they are still terrorizing their people. And that's the hard part is when you find truth like this, it breaks your heart and you wish you could do more, but what can you do? You can't do anything. But it frustrates you to know that since 2014, when Russia started this war with Ukraine, America didn't care because they were not part of NATO. They refused to be part of NATO, and that was their own prerogative, and that was their own thing. Cool. You don't want to be part of NATO? That's fine. We're not going to defend you. And that's how it should be. I'm sorry. But when you have other countries like China and Russia on your doorstep wanting to basically threaten you, come behind your back, enter your country, it's why I understand humanitarian aid. And I get that. If we could all help the world to make it a better place without violence, heck yeah, 100%. I would totally be down. Problem is, the United States already has so many issues in its own country. They want to send all this military aid to Ukraine, but they have already promised Israel military aid since they have been in a war with Pakistan for years, obviously, because of own religious beliefs and which is the Holy Land, who owns the Holy Land. That has been there for hundreds, thousands of years, and it will never stop. But since Israel is part of, I believe they are part of NATO, since they are part of NATO, the U.S., I believe over a decade ago, I'd have to relook that information, but I believe over a decade ago, the U.S. promised to send military aid up to about 30 billion or $1 million. Again, I'd have to look up all this information, but around the ballpark of either billion or million dollars to help them militarily from Pakistan. Now, the problem is Israel is getting frustrated with the U.S. because of the U.S. is sending more military aid to Ukraine than what they promised to send to Israel. So now Israel is getting frustrated because they have been at this war longer than Ukraine. And they were promised such things, and now they are not even, I don't even think they're reaching the promised goal of getting the $30 billion military aid that they were promised. So now Israel's up in arms, and there's tension between America and Israel. And that could be a very potentially scary thing. But we don't know what's going on because of this whole hyper focus on Ukraine right now. There's tensions with Pakistan, Afghanistan still. Going back to Pakistan and Afghanistan, obviously what could happen there is, since we pulled out of Afghanistan so quickly and we left so much military equipment there, like fighter jets, helicopters, guns, missile launchers, they still have that at their fingertips, and they could still use it. So if Pakistan does get involved with China, it could roll over into Afghan being really buddy-buddy with Pakistan and vice versa. And since they have the higher technology of what the U.S. had left, regardless of what the American government had said, they said that they had destroyed it and put salt water, sugar water in these tanks of the military jets and whatnot, which I don't think they did. I think they were just trying to cover their butts last minute to, yeah. I think they were just trying to cover their butts last minute to show that they were not as incompetent as they were. But regardless of that, since there's tensions with Israel and Pakistan is might, that's a big might become potentially buddy with Afghanistan, and then Pakistan is also talking to China about being allies. What is considered the Holy Land in Israel and Jerusalem could potentially be destroyed, like wiped off the planet if this is the case, which would cause so much havoc, wreaking havoc in the world, that it would just I'm so frustrated. There's just so much to keep up with that I just can't stop stuttering. But that my problem with sending so much aid, even if I didn't know the whole Nazi regime in Ukraine, if I didn't know about that information, I would still be upset that we're sending aid. Not in general, but sending so much. The problem is the supply chain for food here is non-existent now. Our shelves are completely empty. People can barely buy, let alone find, food to give to their children or the elderly that they take care of any type, or sickly individuals that need the nutrition to continue to live. farmers aid in fertilizer and water. Yes, water is an issue. And it's harder to find because we can't mass produce it, and it sucks. The fertilizer also comes from, a lot of it is from Ukraine area, and since the war is going on, we're not getting that. But the United States wants to send all this aid, but they're not thinking about the long run and how to become self-sustainable. They're sending all this money and other stuff to Ukraine when we have hungry children here. We need fertilizer for our farmers. Find an alternative. Fix it. We need it done. We cannot rely on these other countries for fertilizer to feed the American people and children. The crime rate has gone up tremendously. The school system is completely broken. It's completely broken in general, and it needs to be revised and fixed and just fixed in general. Homelessness. People cannot find or afford homes, apartments, even shelter, even a tunnel to sleep under. Like they can't find nothing. There's no homeless shelters to go to. There's no under ramps for the freeway to go under. There's no food for them to even scrap out of a dumpster. There's nothing. Adoption centers is another big one that frustrates me. We have hundreds and thousands of children in the system right now that need proper good homes that aren't being taken care of, that they're being abused and neglected, and they're just being bled for the government money by being taken into someone's home. That needs to be fixed right away. Also, sex trafficking and foster care systems, foster and adoption centers. Those two need to be fixed. And sex trafficking. Sex trafficking is a huge issue that needs to be investigated, looked at, and prioritized, because it's not just women, some men as well, but women and children. Women and children are the highest percentage. That needs to be fixed. The children need to be looked after. I don't care who you are. Children need to be taken care of regardless, period. And then the drug epidemic. The drug epidemic is such a problem here that that also needs to be invested in and looked at and taken care of. And instead of sending all this money to a different country, these issues should be looked at, taken care of, invested in, period. That is my problem on why we're sending aid elsewhere. Also, American tax dollars are going to this war. Now think about that. American tax dollars are going to this war just like Afghanistan did. And now that we are finding out that there is actually a Nazi regime that is the head of the government, that should infuriate you more. That should make you more angry, because the locals, the natives of that land, are being tortured and killed. That should PO you more than anything, is knowing that you are paying for Nazis to kill people. And that should upset you, terrify you, question the government in general. 100%. So we need to start looking into this. So let's keep going on with this, because there's a lot of news. So on April 27th, 2022, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin stated, Excuse me. I'm not used to talking this much, so I'm having a problem with having, cotton mouth and whatnot. So on April 27th of 2022, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin stated, "We don't have any time to waste. We have to move at the speed of war." So that is 100% true. That came out of his mouth. And basically, back in April, the U.S. had basically declared war on Russia. That was a scary moment, and it should be. And for all of you to not know that is a terrifying thing. So we are at war already. That happened 2 weeks ago. That is something that you need to be aware of, that you need to prepare for, that you need to prepare in general, even for the food shortage. That is something you need to prepare for in general. So, yeah, keep that in mind. That it was broadcasted for only a couple minutes. He made that statement and then walked off and left stage. No questions, no nothing. He just dipped out. On Marfoogle TV on YouTube on March 6, 2022, which was literally last night. Individual followers sent in emails describing what they thought was a bomb going off by Lake Seattle in Seattle, Washington. Quote, "Saw a flash through shades, 3-second pause, then heard an earth-shattering kaboom about 2 weeks ago. Some miles from Lake Washington, rogue, bolt, no rumble though. Thought World War III started for a minute after." And that was written in from Sean Gustav. So I couldn't necessarily find anything. I couldn't find anything definite. What I had found was there were speculations that a meteorite had hit. They did not have evidence or find evidence of a meteorite hitting, so they were speculating because there was nothing out of the ordinary that had happened at all. So they speculated that a meteorite hit the earth, and that was that. I don't think that was the case. There has been reports a lot lately in the Washington area, in the state alone. And then there has been a lot of military activity with jets and helicopters doing routine military exercises, and within Seattle area as well. So it's not just within rural parts, but it is more frequent in rural parts. So that has been reported by hundreds of individuals. Again, that is not it's not being reported on local news, because as soon as it is, it's being taken out, removed from the public eye. But a lot of individuals are reporting and saying that, yes, this is happening, that I've heard it for weeks and months, and it's still going on. So for it to be a meteorite that hit, I couldn't find any definite answer of a yes or a no. Now, I could have missed it and not saw it, which is a possibility. I could have overlooked it. But the likelihood of that, to me, in my personal opinion, is that is not true. And it is possibly something military, because the likelihood of that for me is higher because of what is going on in the East currently. So So I want to talk about, and I think this is going to be the last thing I'm going to talk about. The last thing I'm going to talk about is how back in the 60s, President Kennedy and the Soviet Union came to an agreement about nuclear missiles being launched and tested on. So with the whole Cuban Missile Crisis, that was right after the war, the Bay of Pigs, excuse me. And that was after the U.S. tried to go in and start a war with Cuba. That's a whole nother scenario. But after that, in 1962, the Soviets secretly went into Cuba to basically have an agreement to put nuclear missiles there because they were both opposed and against the U.S. in general. They were basically enemies to them. So your enemy is my enemy, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember how that saying goes, but you get the gist. Your enemy is my friend type thing. But so when the Soviet Union went in to place their nuclear missiles there, the U.S. immediately had surveillance and helicopters and stuff and saw this. And so the U.S. and Russia immediately became tense, and they had their squabbles. Russia tried to send naval armies over towards the U.S. coast, and then they backed out. And so it was like a game of chicken between Russia and the U.S. for a while. So essentially, what had happened, in spite of the aggression on both sides, Kennedy and the Soviet leader Nikita at the time came to an agreement. So the Russian leader sent a personal message late at night stating, quote, "If there is no intention to doom the world to the catastrophe of the thermonuclear war, then let us not only relax the forces pulling on the ends of the ropes, let us take measures to unite that knot. We are ready for this," unquote. So the Soviet leader went on to send a second message, a second letter addressing American missiles in Turkey. Now, President Kennedy at the time totally ignored the second letter stating the facts that they had missiles in Turkey. But he kept telling Russia to remove the missiles and that he would promise not to strike Cuba in retaliation and Russian troops if he would pull out his missiles from Cuba. So what had happened is secretly President Kennedy sent a message to Russia, the Soviet leader Nikita. He secretly did not address this publicly because he did not want his other enemies and allies to know that he was doing this behind their backs. But he had to make an agreement to save his people and the rest of the world, which was smart. This is why Kennedy was such a good president. Every president has scandals, but he was a very, very good president of his time. And without him, this would not have happened. So Kennedy went on to send a private message directly to the Soviet leader and said that if he removed his nuclear missiles from Cuba, that same day, he would remove the missiles and nukes in Turkey. And right away, the Soviet leader agreed, and they both pulled out at the same time. And Western news did not report on Turkey because they had no idea. And then Russia pulled out of Cuba, which saved America, and then it caused less stress to Russia. So the reason why I bring this up is because if they could do that back in the 60s and come to an agreement, why can't Russia and the U.S. come to an agreement over this? It does not make sense. First off, America shouldn't even be in there. That's not a NATO country, for one. They made their own sovereign choice. They did not want to be part of NATO until the war actually escalated to the point of media, when it had already started forever ago. But Putin had warned America and NATO and all the allies, especially America. Putin warned us several times to leave Ukraine alone or have consequences. Now, the U.S. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to have to start another live stream for you guys on Instagram because my time is running out. But I will pick up on that note in just a second. Bye. Hold, please. I am going to get them back online. Okay. This is like literally my first time doing this, so yeah, I'm experimenting with everything. It's wild. I know I don't have the best setup because I usually have to do it, differently. So yeah, 1 second. All right. I guess we're back online. Sweet, cool, awesome. Let's pick up where we left off. I have to do a part 2 for Instagram because I guess you can only do maybe like an hour long. I don't know. I've never gone live for this stuff before. So anyways, we'll go back to what I was saying where it dropped off is Putin and Russia had repeatedly told the U.S. to back off, do not give aid, repeatedly, many times over the last 2 months. And Russia was very patient, even with some of the sanctions. Yeah, he might have put sanctions back, but he kept saying that he would bomb us, that there would be inconsequential repercussions and of sorts. But even though back in the 60s, Kennedy and the Soviet Union could come to an agreement with the Cuban Missile Crisis, if they can do that and resolve it, why can't we currently do that? America does not need to be involved, and it shouldn't be involved on what's going on in Ukraine because, again, they are not a part of NATO, and they made their choice, period. But that's the thing is, I can understand where Putin's coming from. I'm not defending him. I can say that I understand where he's coming from because of the fact that he does not want to be surrounded by NATO countries. Now, when you are a non-NATO, non-diplomatic country, more of like a dictator country, you don't want to be surrounded by those type of countries, which is totally understandable because then you feel suffocated, then you feel paranoid, then you feel like there's going to be a war coming your way. It becomes more stress on you, on the individual military and whoever's leading. I get it. It's understandable. And I can understand why Putin is getting so frustrated and told NATO to back off. So I don't know. It's just so what came also from the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I will put into here real quick, is that they came to a treaty agreement called Test Ban Treaty. And it basically is where both parties will agree to not test nuclear weapons of any sort unless it's conducted either outer space or underwater. It will not ever be on solid land or above in the atmosphere, because they know the catastrophic consequences of it happening, which is a very adult thing to do, especially back then, that two opposing countries can come to an agreement to save their people, to make sure that the human race does not die, does not exist. I mean, does not perish. So for us to be so stubborn and to assume that we are top dog, that is something that will bring our demise. Period. It will bring our demise quicker than we can say pancakes. I don't know why I picked that word, but I did because it popped in my mind. But seriously, it will, with, I can see both sides of the coin. I can see where the United States wants to protect human life. I get that. I do too. The human race is extinct. Nothing will live on this planet except animals. And that's fine. At that point, cool. But even then, they might not live, which means it's an empty planet with no life. So what's the purpose? Who I don't understand that, and I never will. But that's getting besides the point. So I understand where the U.S. is coming from. They want to help civilians and save lives. I get that. But on the other hand, the U.S. knows that there is a Nazi regime in Ukraine in its government. And it's been there before Zelensky. There are reports and documents that even back in 2014, even a little before then, the government was a Nazi regime. So you can't hide that fact at all. It's documented. And then I can understand where Putin's coming from, because he does still have pro-Russian civilians in that country that are being exterminated, disappeared, tortured. And he is trying to save his civilians and his people, because they don't have the means to move out of country, period. They don't. They really, really don't. I don't care what you say. They don't have the means. They are farmers. That's it. They don't have the money to just up and move countries like we do in the United States or Britain or Germany or Poland, of those sorts. So I can understand why I can understand why Putin wants to go in and liberate his people. And but again, I don't agree with his military leader. I can't remember his name, but I don't agree with his military leader to make the assumption that Hitler was a Jew himself. I don't know if they were trying to make a point that the Western media only reports on what they want to report, which could be a possibility. Take things out of context. I don't know. Pick and choose what you want to report. Or if they were actually serious. I don't know. I don't know. Now, this also goes back to, since there is documentation that the Ukraine military and Secret Service and government is a Nazi regime, is this why Russia went to China during the Olympics to talk about military aid to liberate his people? Possibly. We don't know. That is a possibility. That is an assumption by me. It could be. We don't know. So, there are many, many factors. Anyways. Oh man, it's been well over an hour. I'm tired. I need to go have a cigarette. Let me know what you guys think on this. If I should do more. If I shouldn't. Oh, there goes my dogs. Anyways, I think it's time for me to end this video. Anyways, let me know if I should do more. Love you guys. Bye.